Hannah Evans wiped down table 7 with quick, practiced movements. 6 hours into her double shift, her feet ached inside her black non-slip shoes. But she kept a genuine smile for the customers who'd just left. The morning rush at Joe's Diner meant decent tips, and every dollar counted toward her growing someday fund. "Order up," Frank called from the kitchen window, sliding 2 plates of steaming pancakes onto the counter. Hannah tucked her cleaning rag into her apron pocket and collected the food. As she balanced the plates along her arm with expert precision, she hummed softly to herself, a habit she couldn't seem to break, even after all these years. The melody was from Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece she used to play when life looked very different. "What's that tune?" asked Mrs. Peterson, a regular who always ordered wheat toast with grape jelly on the side. Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "Just something I heard somewhere," she said, placing the pancake orders in front of a young couple at table 3. "Can I get you anything else?" 3 years ago, Hannah had been on track to finish her music degree at the State University. 15 years of piano lessons, countless recitals, and a partial scholarship had seemed like the beginning of the path she'd always imagined. Then her dad got sick, the medical bills piled up, and suddenly keeping the family home became more important than tuition payments. Hannah withdrew from school with plans to return in a year. 1 year turned into 3. Now at 24, Hannah lived in a tiny apartment across town with a keyboard that barely fit between her bed and dresser. She practiced late at night with headphones, when her hands weren't too tired from carrying plates and scrubbing tables. The sheet music for her original composition sat in neat stacks beside her bed, dreams temporarily set aside but not abandoned. "Hannah, table 12 needs water refills," called Deb, the floor manager, pointing toward the window seats. The diner job paid the bills, but it was her evening work at the Glass Note that made the real difference. The upscale restaurant attracted a wealthier crowd, with menu prices that still sometimes shocked Hannah, despite working there for almost 2 years. The Glass Note featured live piano music every evening, creating an atmosphere that justified their expensive cocktails in tiny portions. Hannah tied on her black apron later that afternoon as she arrived at the Glass Note for her second shift of the day. The transition from greasy spoon to fine dining required a complete change of uniform and demeanor. Here she wore all black with her hair pulled back neatly, memorized wine descriptions, and used the phrase "excellent choice" instead of "you got it." "Running late, Evans?" Rick, the restaurant manager, stood by the host station checking reservations on his tablet. "Sorry, bus was delayed." Hannah smoothed her shirt and grabbed her notepad. "I'm ready to go now," Rick nodded curtly. "Section 3 tonight. We're fully booked, and Anton tells me there's some special guests coming in, music people in town for the symphony competition. Big tippers if we impress them." Hannah's heart did a little jump at the mention of the competition. She'd read about it in the local paper. International pianists competing for recognition and a substantial cash prize. In another life, she might have been among them. "Got it. I'll make sure everything's perfect," she promised. Heading to check her tables. The Glass Note's centerpiece was a gleaming black grand piano positioned near the front windows, where the evening light created a perfect spotlight until sunset. Thomas, the regular pianist, usually arrived around 5:30 to prepare for his 6 starting time. Hannah had always been careful to avoid unnecessary conversation with him, worried that her knowledge might somehow reveal itself and raise unwanted questions. By 7 o'clock, the restaurant hummed with conversation and the gentle notes of Thomas's skilled playing. Hannah moved efficiently between her tables, taking orders and delivering food with practiced grace. Her section included a table of 6 well-dressed people who spoke with animated gestures and occasionally jotted notes in small leather-bound notebooks. The critics, Hannah realized. They ordered expensive bottles of wine and spoke with the casual confidence of people accustomed to being heard. "And have you been working here long?" asked one woman as Hannah poured her wine. "Almost 2 years," Hannah answered politely. The woman looked around the restaurant as if assessing its worth. The pianist is adequate, though his Debussy lacks emotional depth. Hannah bit the inside of her cheek to stop herself from responding. Thomas's interpretation wasn't wrong, just different from how she would have played it. "Just adequate?" said the man beside her. "I think that's generous, Victoria. His technique is pedestrian at best." Hannah silently placed their appetizers on the table and stepped away, their comments following her. She'd encountered this type before, people who use their knowledge to diminish rather than appreciate. In her experience, those who spoke most harshly often created the least. The dinner service continued smoothly until a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. Rick was speaking intently on his phone, his expression growing increasingly distressed. Hannah delivered a dessert order and then approached him. "Everything okay?" Rick ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Thomas just called. He's stuck on the highway with a flat tire, and roadside assistance is going to take at least 2 hours. He's not going to make it. Can't we just play recorded music?" Hannah suggested, though she knew the answer. "These people," Rick gestured discreetly toward the critics, "specifically booked here for the live piano. They're already commenting on our disappointing selection. Without the music, we'll lose all credibility." Hannah nodded sympathetically, already turning to check on her tables when Rick grabbed her wrist. "Wait, don't you play? I remember something on your application." Hannah's stomach dropped. "That was a long time ago. I'm really rusty. Rusty is better than nothing." Rick's eyes had the desperate look of a man watching a perfect evening crumble. "Look, these critics could make or break our reputation. Just play something simple, background music until closing." "I can't. I haven't performed in years," Hannah protested, her heart racing at the thought of sitting at that piano with those critical eyes watching. Rick lowered his voice. "Hannah, I need this. The owner's been talking about cutting costs. If tonight goes badly, I can't guarantee hours won't be cut." The implication was clear. Hannah looked around at her co-workers, most working multiple jobs like her, all dependent on their steady income. She thought of her tiny apartment and the stack of overdue bills on her counter. "I don't even have the right clothes," she said weakly, a last attempt at escape. "Nobody cares what you're wearing if you play well," Rick insisted. "Please, 20 minutes just to get us through the rest of dinner service." The critics were now openly discussing the absence of music, their voices carrying across the quieter restaurant. Hannah heard one of them say, "Entirely unprofessional. I suppose we'll include that in the review." Hannah closed her eyes briefly. "Fine, but don't expect anything special." Relief washed over Rick's face. "Thank you. Seriously, you're saving us here." As Hannah approached the piano, she felt as if she were moving through water, everything slowed and dreamlike. It had been nearly 2 years since she'd touched a real piano, rather than her budget keyboard with its slightly sticky keys. The grand piano gleamed under the lights, both welcoming and intimidating. She sat on the bench, adjusting its height with hands that trembled slightly. The restaurant had grown quieter, curious eyes turning toward her, the waitress suddenly at the piano. The critics' table fell silent as they watched with barely concealed skepticism. Hannah placed her fingers on the cool keys, taking a deep breath. She started with something simple, a Bach prelude she'd played since she was 12. The familiar notes helped steady her nerves as her muscle memory gradually returned. The initial stiffness in her fingers began to loosen as she played, like a runner finding their rhythm after a long break. She transitioned into Debussy's Clair de Lune, unable to resist a small act of defiance toward the critics who had dismissed Thomas's interpretation. Under her touch, the piece flowed with the gentle rise and fall of waves, each note clear and intentional. Hannah lost herself in the music, forgetting the watching eyes and the pressure of the moment. When she finished the piece, there was a beat of silence before polite applause spread through the restaurant. Hannah nodded slightly in acknowledgement, her cheeks flushed. As she began her third selection, she noticed the critics leaning toward each other, whispering comments she couldn't hear. For nearly 40 minutes, Hannah played without pause, moving between classical pieces and more contemporary selections. Her body remembered what her mind had feared forgotten: the proper posture, the precise pressure needed for each key, the subtle use of pedals. With each piece, her confidence grew, the joy of playing washing away the anxiety of performance. As she finally stood from the piano, genuine applause filled the restaurant. Hannah gave a small, awkward bow before hurrying back to check on her neglected tables. To her surprise, her customers were smiling, offering compliments rather than complaints about the wait. "I had no idea our server was so talented," said a woman at table 4, reaching for Hannah's hand. "That was absolutely lovely." Hannah thanked her and continued with her duties, hyper-aware of the critics still watching her. One of them, the woman who had called Thomas adequate, stopped her as she passed. "You're full of surprises," the woman said, studying Hannah with new interest. "Where did you train?" "State University, but I didn't finish," Hannah answered simply, not wanting to share more of her story. The woman exchanged glances with her companions. "Well, perhaps that's a conversation for another time. We'll be returning tomorrow evening. Will you be playing again?" Before Hannah could answer, Rick appeared beside her. "She certainly will be," he said smoothly. "Hannah has agreed to fill in while our regular pianist is indisposed." Hannah shot him a startled look, but he continued smiling at the critics. "Excellent," said the woman. "Perhaps tomorrow she might play something original." I sensed there might be a composer hiding behind those selections. As they walked away to finish their closing duties, Hannah whispered fiercely to Rick, "I never agreed to play tomorrow." Rick had the decency to look slightly guilty. "I know, but did you see their reaction? They're coming back specifically to hear you. Hannah, this could change everything for the restaurant." "I have a morning shift at the diner," she protested. "I can't prepare properly." "I'll make it worth your while," Rick promised. "A bonus, plus you can take fewer tables and focus more on the music." Hannah sighed, knowing she could use the money. "Fine. One more night." Later, as she counted her tips, notably larger than usual, Hannah felt conflicting emotions swirling inside her. Fear and excitement battled with a rekindled sense of possibility. She pulled out her phone and canceled her usual morning alarm for the diner. She would need the morning to practice, to prepare something that would truly show what she could do. For the first time in years, she would play her own music for an audience. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Hannah woke before her alarm, her mind already racing with melodies and arrangements. For the first time in years, she called in sick to the diner, her voice carrying a hint of genuine excitement that even Deb noticed. "You never miss work," Deb said, concern evident in her tone. "Everything okay?" "Actually, yes," Hannah replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. "I got an unexpected opportunity at the glass note. I need to prepare." After hanging up, Hannah made a strong cup of coffee and sat at her modest keyboard. She pulled out sheets of music from the drawer beneath her bed, compositions she'd worked on during late nights when sleep evaded her. Some were nearly complete, others mere fragments of ideas waiting to be developed. Her fingers hovered over the keys as she considered which piece would best represent her voice. The morning sun streamed through her small window as Hannah lost herself in her music. Hours passed unnoticed as she refined, adjusted, and practiced. The piece she had chosen was one she'd started during her last semester at university, a composition that blended classical structure with more contemporary influences. Her former professor had praised its potential, but noted it needed more emotional depth. Now, after years of life's harder lessons, Hannah found that depth came naturally. Around noon, her phone buzzed with a text from Rick. "Critics made dinner reservations for 7 p.m. Can you start playing at 6:30? Hannah's stomach tightened. The reality of what she'd agreed to suddenly felt overwhelming. These weren't just any critics, they were professionals in town for a prestigious competition, people whose opinions carried weight in the music world. She typed back a quick yes before she could change her mind. She spent the afternoon alternating between practicing her original piece and selecting other compositions that would showcase her range. Every so often doubt would creep in. Who was she to think her music was worthy of such an audience? Each time she pushed those thoughts aside and returned to the keys. At 4:30, Hannah took a quick shower, trying to wash away her nervousness along with the morning's sweat. She stared at her limited wardrobe, realizing nothing she owned suited the occasion. Her work clothes were practical, not performance attire. Finally, she settled on her one good black dress, simple but elegant enough for the glass note's upscale atmosphere. The bus ride to the restaurant felt both too long and too short. Hannah clutched a folder containing her sheet music, though she'd memorized every note. People around her chatted and scrolled on their phones, unaware that the woman sitting quietly by the window was fighting a private battle against fear and self-doubt. "You're early," Rick noted with surprise when Hannah walked through the staff entrance at 5:15. "Needed to get comfortable with the piano before people arrive," she explained, her voice steadier than she felt. Rick nodded approvingly. "Smart. The owner might stop by tonight. I told him about you." Great, Hannah thought, another person to impress. Or disappoint. The restaurant was still quiet, with staff setting tables and bartenders preparing for the evening. Hannah walked to the grand piano and ran her hands lightly over its surface. Unlike last night's emergency performance, today she was expected to deliver something remarkable. The pressure felt entirely different. She sat down and began with simple scales to warm up her fingers and test the piano's action and tone. The instrument responded beautifully to her touch, its rich sound filling the empty restaurant. Several staff members paused in their work to listen. "I had no idea you could play like that," said Lily, one of the other servers, as she placed water glasses on nearby tables. "You never mentioned it," Hannah shrugged. It didn't seem relevant to carrying plates. "Well, you've been hiding a serious talent," Lily replied with a smile. "We're all excited to hear you tonight." That simple encouragement helped ease some of Hannah's tension. She continued practicing as the first customers began to arrive at 5:30, focusing on pieces that created pleasant background ambiance. By 6:15, the restaurant was filling up, conversations and the clink of silverware mixing with her music. Hannah spotted the critics the moment they entered. They were led to a prime table near the piano, close enough to observe her technique. She nodded politely as they took their seats, trying to ignore how her heart hammered in her chest. "Good evening," said the woman who had spoken to her yesterday. "Victoria," Hannah now remembered. "We're looking forward to your performance." "Thank you," Hannah replied, wishing her voice sounded more confident. "I hope you enjoy it." As the critics settled in, Hannah noticed a well-dressed older man enter with Rick, who pointed in her direction with evident pride. The owner, she guessed, feeling another layer of pressure descend on her shoulders. At precisely 6:30, Hannah began her planned program with Bach's Prelude in C major, from the Well-Tempered Clavier, a piece chosen for its clarity and precision. She followed it with Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9, No. 2, allowing herself to add more emotional interpretation than she had during yesterday's cautious playing. The critics watched intently, occasionally making notes or whispering to one another. Hannah tried to focus solely on the music, but their presence loomed large in her awareness. After 40 minutes of classical selections, she took a brief pause, sipping water and gathering her courage for what came next. The restaurant had grown unusually quiet, many diners paying more attention to the piano than their meals. Rick caught her eye from across the room and gave her an encouraging thumbs up. Hannah took a deep breath and positioned her hands over the keys. "This next piece is an original composition," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through the now attentive room. "It's called Waiting in the Wings." She began with a simple, haunting melody in her right hand, a musical question seeking an answer. Her left hand entered with steady, supporting chords that gradually built in complexity. The piece evolved from its contemplative beginning into something more urgent and insistent, her fingers dancing across the keys with increasing speed and intensity. Hannah poured everything into the music, her postponed dreams, years of serving others while her own aspirations waited patiently, the daily struggle to keep believing in possibilities. The middle section incorporated subtle jazz influences before returning to classical structure for the finale, which resolved the opening question with hard-won certainty. When she played the final chord, the restaurant remained completely silent for 3 heartbeats. Then applause erupted, not the polite acknowledgement of background music but the enthusiastic response to a true performance. Hannah stood and gave a small bow, her cheeks flushed with emotion and exertion. Victoria, the lead critic, was watching her with an expression Hannah couldn't quite interpret, surprise mingled with something else. The owner approached the piano, clapping with genuine appreciation. "Extraordinary," he said, extending his hand. "I'm David Chen, owner of the Glass Note. I had no idea we had such talent serving our dinners." "Thank you," Hannah managed, shaking his hand. "I'm glad you enjoyed it." "Enjoyed is an understatement," Mr. Chen replied. "You've transformed the atmosphere of my restaurant tonight. Please, join me and our special guest for a moment when you take your break." Hannah glanced nervously at the critics' table. "I should keep playing, just for a few minutes," Mr. Chen insisted. "I think you'll want to hear what they have to say." Hannah continued her performance for another half hour, alternating between classical pieces and one more original composition, a shorter, lighter piece that still showcased her distinctive style. Throughout her playing, she noticed more people entering the restaurant, some without dinner reservations simply standing near the bar area to listen. During her break, Hannah reluctantly approached the critics' table where Mr. Chen was already seated. Rick hovered nearby, his expression a mix of anxiety and pride. "Please sit down," Victoria said, gesturing to an empty chair. "That was quite a revelation." "Thank you," Hannah replied, perching on the edge of the seat. "I'm curious," said one of the other critics, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses. "Where did you study composition? Your structure is clearly classically informed, but there's something quite contemporary in your expression." "State University," Hannah answered, "but I didn't finish my degree. Family circumstances, yet you've clearly continued developing your craft," Victoria noted. "That piece, Waiting in the Wings, it has remarkable emotional maturity. Not what I expected after hearing you play last night." "Last night I was terrified," Hannah admitted with a small laugh. "I hadn't performed in years." "And you work here as a server?" asked another critic, glancing at her dress as though just realizing she wasn't wearing the staff uniform. Before Hannah could respond, Mr. Chen interjected. "Not anymore, at least not exclusively. I'd like to offer Hannah a regular performance position here. Thursday through Saturday evenings, proper compensation, of course." Hannah stared at him in disbelief. "But Thomas, we'll keep his Sunday through Wednesday slots," Mr. Chen assured her. "But after what I've heard tonight, we'd be fools not to feature your talent." Victoria leaned forward. "Ms. Evans, I represent the Westridge Music Foundation. We sponsor several promising composers each year. I'd very much like to discuss your work further, and perhaps arrange for a proper recording of your compositions." The conversation continued, voices swirling around Hannah as possibilities she'd long stopped considering suddenly materialized before her. The foundation wanted to hear more of her work. Another critic mentioned a teaching position at the city's arts academy. Mr. Chen outlined a performance schedule that would pay nearly twice her current wages. "I don't understand," Hannah said finally, feeling overwhelmed. "Yesterday I was just a waitress." "No," Victoria corrected her gently. "Yesterday you were a musician working as a waitress. There's quite a difference." When Hannah returned to the piano for her final set of the evening, she played with a new freedom. The weight of hidden talent and deferred dreams had lifted, allowing her music to soar. Diners who had come for a meal stayed for the performance, their applause growing more enthusiastic with each piece. Later that night, as Hannah rode the bus home clutching a business card from the Westridge Foundation and a written offer from Mr. Chen, she felt a curious sense of unreality. How quickly life could change direction, all because Thomas had gotten a flat tire. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "You're all over social media. Someone posted videos of your performance and they're getting thousands of views." Hannah's apartment seemed different when she returned. The same small space, but somehow less confining. She sat at her keyboard, running her fingers over the plastic keys that had been her only outlet for so long. Tomorrow she would call the foundation. Tomorrow she would start planning for a future that suddenly included music at its center. Tomorrow everything would begin to change, but tonight she simply played for herself, a smile spreading across her face as the melody of a new composition began to take shape beneath her fingers. The morning light filtered through Hannah's thin curtains, waking her earlier than usual. For a moment she lay still, wondering if last night had been a dream. The business card on her nightstand, embossed with the Westridge Music Foundation logo, confirmed it wasn't. She reached for her phone and gasped at the notifications flooding her screen. Dozens of messages from friends and co-workers, all sharing links to videos of her performance. Hannah clicked on one, watching herself through a stranger's shaky phone camera as she played Waiting in the Wings. The video had over 20,000 views already. "This is surreal," she whispered to her empty apartment. Her phone rang. Deb from the diner. "Hannah Evans, why am I watching my best waitress trending online?" Deb's voice was a mix of excitement and confusion. "Is this why you called in sick?" Hannah laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. "It's a long story. I was filling in for the pianist at the Glass Note and things just happened." "Well, these things don't just happen," Deb replied. "That kind of talent doesn't come from nowhere. The morning regulars are all talking about you." Mrs. Peterson nearly spilled her coffee when she recognized you in the video her granddaughter showed her. The thought of her two worlds colliding made Hannah's head spin. For years she'd kept her musical background separate from her serving job. as though acknowledging one would somehow diminish the other. "I'm not sure what happens next," Hannah admitted. "The restaurant offered me a regular performing position, and there's a foundation interested in my compositions. That's wonderful. Though I suppose this means you'll be leaving us soon," Deb said, a hint of sadness in her voice. "I don't know," Hannah replied honestly. "Everything's moving so fast." After promising to keep Deb updated, Hannah made coffee and sat at her keyboard. She needed to prepare for her meeting with Victoria from the Westridge Foundation later that day. Which compositions should she share? What should she wear? Would they still be interested when they heard more of her work? Or would last night's performance prove to be a one-time wonder? The doorbell rang, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. Hannah opened it to find Lily from the glass note holding 2 coffee cups and a paper bag. "I brought breakfast," Lily announced, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "And insider information." Hannah accepted the coffee gratefully. "What kind of information?" "First, Thomas quit this morning," Lily said, pulling pastries from the bag. "Apparently he was furious when he found out about your performance. Said something about amateurs stealing his spotlight." "That's not fair," Hannah protested. "I was just helping out in an emergency." "Second," Lily continued, ignoring Hannah's objection, "those critics weren't just random music people. They're judges for the Keller Prize." Hannah nearly choked on her coffee. "The Keller Prize? That's one of the most prestigious awards for new composers." "Exactly. And they're not supposed to be scouting competitors outside the official submissions. But Victoria kept saying your piece was exactly what the foundation has been looking for." Hannah sank onto her sofa, overwhelmed. The Keller Prize wasn't just about recognition. It came with a substantial monetary award and a commission for a full concert program with the City Symphony. "I'm meeting her today," Hannah said quietly. "I thought it was just about potential funding for recording, not that." "Well, get ready for your life to change," Lily said with a grin. "Oh, and Mr. Chen wants you to start tomorrow night. He's already printed new promotional materials featuring Hannah Evans' piano compositions and classical favorites." After Lily left, Hannah spent hours organizing her music and recording rough versions of 3 compositions on her keyboard. The quality wasn't perfect, but it would give Victoria a broader sense of her work. At 2 o'clock, dressed in her best interview clothes, Hannah entered the hotel where Victoria was staying. The elegant lobby made her feel immediately out of place in her simple outfit, but she squared her shoulders and approached the reception desk. "I'm here to see Victoria Winters," she said, trying to project confidence. "Yes, Ms. Evans. Ms. Winters is expecting you in the lounge," the receptionist replied with a professional smile. Victoria was seated near a window, her tablet and several folders arranged neatly on the table before her. She stood to greet Hannah with a firm handshake. "Thank you for meeting me," Victoria said. "I hope you don't mind, but I've asked another colleague to join us." "He should be here shortly." They made small talk about the restaurant and the videos circulating online. Victoria seemed genuinely impressed by the public response, noting that it confirmed her initial impression of Hannah's talent. "Ah, here he is," Victoria said, waving to someone behind Hannah. Hannah turned to see a distinguished-looking man approaching their table. Her heart nearly stopped when she recognized him, William Keller himself, the renowned composer and founder of the prize that bore his name. "Ms. Evans," he said, extending his hand. "I watched your performance online this morning. Quite extraordinary." Hannah shook his hand, momentarily speechless. "Thank you, sir. I'm honored to meet you." As they all sat down, William studied Hannah with curious eyes. "Victoria tells me you haven't completed your formal education?" "No, sir. Family circumstances required me to leave school during my 3rd year." "And yet you've continued composing?" Hannah nodded. "Music isn't something I can turn off. Even during my busiest times, melodies and arrangements keep forming in my mind. I write when I can, usually late at night. That's the mark of a true composer," William said with approval. "Tell me about Waiting in the Wings. The emotional journey of the piece is quite compelling." For the next hour, Hannah found herself engaged in the most stimulating musical conversation she'd had in years. William and Victoria asked thoughtful questions about her influences, her process, and her vision for her work. They listened to the recordings she'd brought, occasionally stopping to discuss particular passages or techniques. "Your work shows remarkable maturity," William said finally, "especially considering the constraints under which you've been creating." Victoria nodded in agreement. Which brings us to our proposal. She slid a folder across the table. The Westridge Foundation would like to offer you our annual Emerging Composer Grant. It includes funding for professional recording of your work, mentorship opportunities, and a stipend to allow you time to compose. Hannah opened the folder with trembling hands, her eyes widening at the figure on the first page. The stipend alone was more than she earned in 6 months at both her jobs combined. Additionally, William added, we would like to invite you to submit a portfolio for this year's Keller Prize competition. Normally the deadline has passed, but the committee has agreed to make an exception in your case. This is overwhelming, Hannah said honestly. Yesterday I was worried about making rent this month, and today you're being recognized for talent that's always been there, Victoria finished for her. The only difference is now other people can see it too. As Hannah left the hotel, contract in hand and head spinning with possibilities, her phone buzzed with a text from Rick. Need to discuss your schedule. Big developments at the restaurant. Call me. Hannah ducked into a quiet coffee shop to make the call, ordering the cheapest item on the menu to justify taking up space. Hannah, glad you called. Rick's voice boomed through the phone. I've got news. After your videos went viral, we've been flooded with reservations specifically requesting tables for your performance nights. That's great, Hannah said, stirring her coffee absently. More than great, it's unprecedented. Mr. Chen wants to feature you prominently in our advertising. He's also asking if you'd consider adding a Sunday afternoon performance. We've never even opened for Sunday lunch before, but people are requesting it. Hannah hesitated, thinking about the foundation grant and the work she needed to complete for the Keller Prize submission. I'm not sure I can commit to 4 days right now. I've just received a composition grant that will require significant time. Rick was silent for a moment. I understand, but this is a huge opportunity for the restaurant. What if we increased your performance fee, and you could still take some serving shifts if you want the extra income? Let me think about it, Hannah promised. I need to figure out what's realistic. By the time she arrived back at her apartment, Hannah felt both exhilarated and exhausted. Every aspect of her life seemed to be changing simultaneously. She needed to make decisions about the restaurant offer, about whether to return to school to complete her degree, about how best to use the foundation's resources. She sat at her keyboard, seeking comfort in the familiar feel of the keys beneath her fingers. She began playing softly, an improvisation that reflected her swirling emotions: hope, fear, gratitude, uncertainty. The melody evolved as she played, eventually settling into something new and promising. Her phone rang again. This time it was the diner. Hannah, it's Frank from the kitchen, said the gruff voice she knew well. Look, I know you're getting famous and all, but Mrs. Peterson is asking if you'll be here for her birthday breakfast next Thursday. Says it won't be the same without you. Hannah smiled, suddenly seeing a way forward through the chaos of opportunities. Tell her I'll be there, she said. Some things don't need to change just because others do. After hanging up, Hannah grabbed a notebook and began mapping out a weekly schedule. The foundation grant would provide financial stability, allowing her to be more selective about her working hours. She could perform 3 nights at the Glass Note, keep 1 or 2 morning shifts at the diner for the regulars who'd become like family, and still have time for serious composition work. As evening fell, Hannah received an email from Victoria with details about recording sessions and her first mentorship meeting. The reality of her new circumstances was finally sinking in. She opened her window and looked out at the city lights, remembering all the nights she'd done the same thing while wondering if her music would ever reach beyond her small apartment. Her phone buzzed with another notification. Lily had sent a link to a music blog that had featured her story. From serving tables to serving musical inspiration, the unexpected discovery of Hannah Evans. The article described her journey from reluctant performer to overnight sensation, celebrating both her talent and the authentic way it had been revealed. The final paragraph read, in an industry often focused on manufactured stars, Evans represents something refreshingly genuine, a reminder that extraordinary talent sometimes hides in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to emerge from the wings. Hannah set her phone aside and turned to her keyboard once more. She had a new composition forming, something about unexpected second chances and the courage to step into the spotlight after years of waiting in the shadows. Her fingers found the opening notes as a sense of purpose settled over her. Tomorrow would bring more changes, more decisions, more adjustments to her new reality. But tonight she would do what she had always done during times of transition and uncertainty. She would play. And in playing, she would find her way forward. 3 weeks felt like 3 years. Hannah's life had transformed so completely that she sometimes woke up disoriented, momentarily forgetting that she was no longer just a waitress struggling to pay rent. The recording studio was nothing like she had imagined. Not a glamorous space with mood lighting and expensive furniture, but a practical room with sound-absorbing panels and a magnificent Steinway grand piano that made her keyboard at home feel like a child's toy. "Let's try that section again," said Paul, the sound engineer the foundation had hired. The dynamics in the middle passage weren't quite hitting right. Hannah nodded, repositioning her hands on the keys. This was her 4th day in the studio, recording the 6 compositions that would comprise her debut EP. The foundation had originally planned for just 3 pieces, but after hearing her full portfolio, Victoria had insisted on doubling the project's scope. "From the pickup measure," Paul directed, his voice coming through Hannah's headphones. She played the passage again, this time allowing more contrast between the delicate opening and the building intensity that followed. The piece, titled Nocturne for Dreamers, was one she'd composed during her final semester at university, then refined during countless late nights after double shifts. "Perfect," Paul said when she finished. "That's the one. You can feel the journey in it now." Hannah removed her headphones and stretched her fingers. "Can I hear it back?" Paul played the recording, and Hannah closed her eyes, listening critically to her own work. It was strange hearing her music performed on a professional piano, captured with precision microphones that caught every nuance. The piece sounded both familiar and new, still her creation but somehow elevated. "What do you think?" Paul asked when the playback finished. "It's actually good," Hannah said with surprise in her voice. Paul laughed. "You sound shocked. Did you expect it to be terrible?" "Not terrible, just..." Hannah struggled to find the words. "When you work on something alone for so long, you lose perspective. I've played these pieces only for myself for years. Hearing them like this makes them feel real in a different way." "Well, they're definitely real," Paul assured her, "and definitely good. Victoria's coming by tomorrow to hear the final cuts before mastering." After the session ended, Hannah checked her phone to find 3 missed calls from Rick at the Glass Note. Her weekend performances at the restaurant had become the hottest ticket in town, with reservations booked solid a month in advance. Though grateful for the opportunity, Hannah sometimes missed the simplicity of carrying plates rather than carrying the entire evening's entertainment. She returned Rick's call as she walked to the bus stop. Finally, Rick answered on the first ring. "I've been trying to reach you all day. Sorry, I was recording." "What's up?" "Entertainment Weekly wants to do a feature on you in the restaurant. They're sending a photographer this Friday during your performance." Hannah stopped walking. "A feature? Like a full article?" "A full spread," Rick confirmed, his voice brimming with excitement. "They're calling it The Waitress Who Became a Maestro or something like that. It's huge exposure, Hannah." "Huge? That's..." "Wow," Hannah managed, feeling a familiar mixture of excitement and anxiety. "I'll need to practice even more for Friday." "Just be yourself," Rick advised. "That's what everyone's connecting with, your authenticity. Oh, and wear something nice. Not too formal, but not your server uniform either." After hanging up, Hannah continued to the bus stop, her mind racing. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of performances, recording sessions, and meetings with music industry people whose names she'd only ever read in articles. Through it all, she'd maintained her Thursday morning shift at the diner, finding unexpected comfort in the familiar routine of coffee refills and breakfast orders. Hannah's phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Check your email now." Fumbling with her phone while boarding the bus, Hannah opened her email to find a message from William Keller himself. With the subject line, "Keller Prize Finalist." Her heart pounding, she read, "Dear Ms. Evans, I am pleased to inform you that your composition portfolio has been selected as one of 5 finalists for this year's Keller Prize. The committee was particularly impressed by Waiting in the Wings, which demonstrates remarkable technical skill and emotional depth. As a finalist, you are invited to compose a new, original piece to be performed by the City Symphony during our annual gala concert on June 15th. You will work directly with conductor Thomas Reynolds to prepare your composition for orchestration. Please Contact my assistant to schedule your first meeting with Maestro Reynolds. Congratulations on this significant achievement. Sincerely, William Keller. Hannah read the email 3 times before its meaning fully registered. A finalist. 1 of 5. With a chance to hear her music performed by a full symphony orchestra. The bus lurched forward and Hannah nearly dropped her phone. The passenger beside her, an elderly man with kind eyes, noticed her expression. Good news? He asked with a gentle smile. Life-changing, Hannah replied, still staring at her phone. I'm a finalist for a music prize I never thought I'd even qualify for. Congratulations, the man said. There's nothing quite like seeing years of hard work finally recognized. Hannah nodded, suddenly thinking of all the late nights, the sacrificed social life. The times she'd played through exhaustion because the music wouldn't let her rest until it was expressed. It wasn't always hard work, she admitted. Sometimes it was just necessity, like breathing. When she arrived home, Hannah found a small package outside her door, a gift from Mrs. Peterson and the other diner regulars. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound music notebook with a note that read, "For your next masterpiece. We're so proud of you." The gesture brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Despite the growing attention from critics and industry professionals, this simple acknowledgement from people who had known her as just Hannah touched something deeper. Hannah made a cup of tea and sat at her keyboard, opening the new notebook to its first blank page. The Keller Prize Commission would require something special, not just technically impressive but meaningful. As her fingers hovered over the keys, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. 3 weeks ago, she'd been forcing herself to play through terror before critical eyes. Now she was being asked to create something new, with the full resources of an orchestra at her disposal. The contrast was so stark it almost felt unreal. Her phone rang, Victoria calling to congratulate her on becoming a finalist. I knew they would recognize your talent, Victoria said warmly. William was particularly moved by your story as well as your music. It's not often we find someone with such genuine passion persevering through difficult circumstances. I'm still processing it, Hannah admitted. The idea of writing for a full orchestra is intimidating. That's why you'll be working with Maestro Reynolds, Victoria assured her. He's brilliant at guiding composers through the orchestration process, especially those who haven't had formal training in it. After the call, Hannah opened her laptop to research Maestro Reynolds. The conductor had a reputation for championing new composers and bringing fresh voices to classical music. His most recent season had featured works from underrepresented communities and experimental compositions that pushed traditional boundaries. Hannah's first meeting with him was scheduled for the following week. She had just days to develop her initial ideas for the commissioned piece. Outside her window, rain began to fall, creating a gentle rhythm against the glass. Hannah played a few exploratory notes, letting the sound of the rain influence her tempo and mood. A melody began to form, something with quiet determination at its core, building toward a moment of triumph. She played for hours, recording snippets on her phone and making notes in her new leather-bound book. This composition would be different from anything she'd written before. Not just music from her personal journey, but something that spoke to universal experiences of doubt, perseverance, and unexpected vindication. Around midnight, exhausted but satisfied with her progress, Hannah checked her email one last time before bed. Among the congratulatory messages was one from the State University's music department chair. Dear Ms. Evans, your recent recognition has come to our attention, and we've been following your success with great interest. As your former institution, we're proud to see your talent receiving the acknowledgement it deserves. I would like to discuss the possibility of you returning to complete your degree under special circumstances, with credit for your professional achievements and a potential teaching opportunity in our composition program. Please contact me at your convenience to explore this option further. Best regards, Dr. Elaine Howard, Department Chair. Hannah stared at the screen, a complicated mixture of emotions washing over her. The university that hadn't been able to accommodate her family crisis 3 years ago was now reaching out because of her success. Part of her wanted to ignore the email entirely, a small, hurt part that remembered the struggle of leaving her education behind. Yet another part recognized the value of completing her degree, especially with the accommodation of her professional work and teaching. The thought of helping other students navigate their own musical journeys held unexpected appeal. Hannah closed her laptop without responding, deciding to sleep on the decision. Her new life was offering so many paths forward, each with its own opportunities and challenges. For the first time, she had the luxury of choosing carefully rather than simply accepting whatever would keep her financially afloat. The next morning, Hannah arrived at the diner for her regular Thursday shift, tying on her apron with practiced ease. "There's our celebrity," Frank called from the kitchen window. "Shouldn't you be signing autographs somewhere fancy instead of pouring coffee?" Hannah laughed, grabbing her order pad. "The coffee here is better than anywhere fancy." As she moved through her familiar routine, Hannah felt a strange sense of peace amidst the chaos her life had become. Here she wasn't a finalist or a rising star or a feature story. She was just Hannah, who knew that Mrs. Peterson liked her toast barely browned and that the construction workers at Table 9 needed extra napkins. "Heard you on the radio this morning," said Joe, the diner's owner, as he rang up a customer's bill. "They played a clip of your performance and talked about your meteoric rise." "Really?" Hannah hadn't known about any radio coverage. Joe nodded. "Said something about you being an inspiration for artists everywhere. Working hard, never giving up, all that good stuff." Hannah felt her cheeks warm. "I was just doing what I loved in whatever time I could find." "That's exactly why people connect with your story," Joe replied. "You're real. Not some overnight success who had everything handed to them." As her shift ended, Hannah noticed a young woman watching her from a corner table. The woman approached hesitantly, clutching a napkin. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "Are you Hannah Evans, the composer?" Hannah nodded, still unused to being recognized. "I saw your videos online," the woman continued. "I'm a music student and I just wanted to say that your story means a lot to me. I've been working 2 jobs to pay for school and sometimes it feels impossible to keep going." "I understand completely," Hannah said with genuine empathy. Would you mind signing this?" The woman held out the napkin. "It would remind me that it's worth it to keep trying." As Hannah signed her name, she realized that her journey had significance beyond her own life. Her story of perseverance wasn't just about music, it was about holding on to hope when circumstances suggested otherwise. Walking home, Hannah mentally composed an email to Dr. Howard. She would explore the possibility of returning to school, but on her own terms. Perhaps there was a way to create something new there too. A program for students facing financial hardships, using her foundation connections to establish scholarships. The rain had cleared, leaving the city fresh and bright. Hannah looked up at the blue sky, remembering all the days she'd walked this same route with shoulders heavy from exhaustion and worry. The path was the same, but the woman walking it had changed, not just in circumstance but in her understanding of what was possible. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Maestro Reynolds. "Looking forward to our meeting next week. Your music has great heart. Let's give it wings." Hannah smiled and quickened her pace toward home. She had a symphony to write. The concert hall lights dimmed slowly, hushing the packed audience. Hannah stood in the wings, heart pounding against her ribs as she watched the orchestra members settle into position. 6 months ago, she had been carrying plates and refilling coffee cups. Tonight, the City Symphony would perform her composition as the finale of the Keller Prize Gala. Nervous, Maestro Reynolds appeared beside her, already dressed in his formal tails. Terrified, Hannah admitted. "What if they hate it?" The conductor smiled kindly. "They won't. But even if some do, that's the nature of creating something meaningful. Not everyone connects with the same art in the same way." Hannah smoothed down her concert dress, a simple but elegant blue gown she'd purchased with her first royalty check from the EP, which had exceeded all sales expectations. The months of working with Maestro Reynolds had transformed her original ideas into something grander than she'd imagined possible. Her piece, titled From Service to Symphony, traced a journey from quiet restraint through challenge and determination to eventual triumph. The other finalists' pieces were amazing, Hannah whispered, thinking of the 4 compositions that had already been performed. Especially that third one with the violin solo. Each was excellent in its own way, Reynolds agreed. But yours has something special. Authenticity that can't be taught. He checked his watch. "I should go. Remember, just breathe and listen. This is your night too." As Reynolds walked onto the stage to enthusiastic applause, Hannah peered into the audience. In the 5th row center, she spotted her cheering section. Deb and Frank from the diner, Lily and Rick from the glass note, and Mrs. Peterson with her opera glasses already raised. Behind them sat Victoria and William Keller, their expressions expectant. Mr. Chen had bought an entire row for Glassnote staff, transforming the evening into an impromptu company event. "Your success is our success," he had told Hannah when presenting her with the tickets. The restaurant now featured a weekly new composer's night. Inspired by Hannah's story, the applause quieted as Maestro Reynolds addressed the audience. "Our final composition tonight comes from Hannah Evans, whose remarkable journey from restaurant server to acclaimed composer has captured imaginations around the country. Her piece, From Service to Symphony, is not just technically impressive but emotionally resonant, a testament to perseverance and the power of art to transform lives. Please welcome to the stage for the first time composer Hannah Evans." Hannah hadn't expected the introduction. Reynolds had said nothing about her joining him on stage before the performance. For a paralyzing moment she considered fleeing, but then she remembered all the moments that had brought her here, from that first terrified performance, when Thomas's tire went flat, to the countless hours in the recording studio and the collaborative sessions with Reynolds and the orchestra. She stepped onto the stage, blinking in the bright lights. The applause swelled, warming her like sunshine. She gave a small, humble bow and moved to stand beside the conductor, who whispered, "I thought you deserved to see it from this perspective." Facing the audience briefly, Hannah felt a wave of gratitude. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This piece tells the story of dreams that wait patiently for their moment, sometimes for years, sometimes in unexpected places. I hope it speaks to anyone who has ever had to put their passion aside while life demanded other things." She nodded to Reynolds and moved to the side of the stage where a seat had been arranged for her. The conductor raised his baton and the hall fell silent. The piece began softly, a simple melody in the cellos, representing the quiet persistence of passion even when unexpressed. Hannah closed her eyes, hearing her personal music transformed by 70 skilled musicians. The woodwinds entered with quick, busy passages that captured the hurried pace of her former daily life. As the composition progressed, the full orchestra built toward the central theme, the moment of revelation when hidden talent finally emerges. Hannah opened her eyes to watch Reynolds guide the musicians through the crescendo she had painstakingly crafted. His hands shaped her music with perfect understanding of its emotional core. The final movement began with a piano solo. Hannah had insisted on this element, a nod to where her journey had begun. The orchestra gradually joined, supporting and then elevating the piano's voice until the triumphant conclusion. The final notes lingered in the air, a moment of perfect suspension before they faded to silence. For 2 heartbeats the hall remained absolutely quiet. Then applause erupted. Not the polite acknowledgement of the previous pieces, but a genuine, enthusiastic response that built as people rose to their feet. Hannah stood, overwhelmed by the reception, and joined Reynolds center stage. The conductor gestured toward her, stepping back so she could take a solo bow. The principal pianist stood, beckoning Hannah to acknowledge their collaboration. One by one, the orchestra members rose, honoring the composer whose work they had just brought to life. From her vantage point, Hannah could see her friends from the diner cheering wildly, Mrs. Peterson dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. After 3 curtain calls, Hannah finally exited the stage on shaking legs. In the green room, she collapsed onto a chair, emotionally drained but exhilarated. "Breathtaking," said a voice from the doorway. William Keller entered with Victoria beside him. "Truly extraordinary work, Ms. Evans." "Thank you," Hannah managed, still processing what had just occurred. "The judges are deliberating now," Victoria explained. "But regardless of the final decision, you've created something remarkable tonight." William nodded in agreement. "The technical skill was evident, but more importantly, you moved people. That's the true measure of artistic success." They left her to collect herself before the reception that would follow the judge's announcement. Hannah checked her phone to find dozens of messages and notifications. One text from a former music professor simply read, "I knew you would find your way. So proud." Hannah had accepted the university's offer to complete her degree through a combination of credit for professional work and part-time study. She would begin teaching a course on composition for non-traditional students the following semester, a program she had helped design based on her own experience. Maestro Reynolds joined her, eyes bright with excitement. They're ready to announce. Shall we? Together they returned to the stage where all 5 finalist composers were gathered. The head judge, a renowned composer in her own right, approached the microphone. Each of tonight's compositions demonstrated exceptional skill and artistic vision, she began. The judges were impressed by the diversity of approaches and the technical mastery displayed across all 5 works. Hannah held her breath, trying to prepare herself for any outcome. She had already achieved more than she'd ever thought possible 6 months ago. After careful consideration, the Keller Prize for this year is awarded to. The pause seemed eternal. Hannah Evans, for From Service to Symphony. The hall erupted once more. Hannah stood frozen until Reynolds gently nudged her forward. She accepted the award, a crystal sculpture and the formal announcement of the commission with trembling hands. Thank you, she said when the applause finally quieted. 6 months ago I was a waitress with a keyboard and scattered dreams. I never imagined standing here tonight. She paused, gathering her thoughts. We often talk about overnight success, but that's rarely the reality. Most of us work for years in obscurity, holding on to our passion through difficult times, waiting for a chance that might never come. She looked out at the audience, finding the faces of those who had been part of her journey. I was lucky. Someone noticed. But there are countless talented people still waiting tables, driving buses, answering phones, creating beautiful work that the world hasn't discovered yet. My hope is that this recognition helps create opportunities not just for me, but for others whose circumstances have temporarily overshadowed their gifts. The reception afterward was a blur of congratulations and introductions. Music directors, publishers, and fellow composers all wanted to meet the waitress who had become the talk of the classical music world. Hannah navigated the conversations with growing confidence, no longer feeling like an imposter in this environment. As the crowd thinned, Hannah finally found a moment alone with her friends from the diner and the glass note. So, Ms. Big Shot Composer, Frank teased, will you still make my eggs over easy on Thursdays? Hannah laughed. Try to stop me. Those morning shifts keep me grounded. The university called again, Deb mentioned. They want to name a scholarship after you for working musicians. That's... wow. Hannah shook her head in disbelief. Things keep happening so fast. You deserve all of it, Lily insisted. You worked harder than anyone I know, even when there was no guarantee it would lead anywhere. Mrs. Peterson took Hannah's hand in her weathered one. I knew you were special from the first time I heard you humming while pouring coffee. You have a gift, dear, but more importantly, you have heart. Later that night, after the celebrations had ended, Hannah returned to her apartment, a new one, modestly larger than her previous place with room for a proper piano. The crystal award caught the lamplight as she set it on the shelf beside her first EP and the leather-bound notebook now filled with compositions. She sat at the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys. Despite the evening's triumph, she felt drawn to the instrument not for practice or composition, but for the pure joy of making music, the same joy that had sustained her through years of double shifts and deferred dreams. Hannah played softly, improvising a gentle melody that reflected the complex emotions of the day. This was what it had always been about, not awards or recognition or even financial stability, but the profound connection she felt when translating life into music. Her phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Congratulations again. Get some rest. Tomorrow we discuss your symphony commission and international tour. The real journey is just beginning. Hannah smiled at the message, no longer intimidated by such opportunities. She had discovered something important through this unexpected path. Confidence not just in her music, but in her ability to navigate whatever came next. Outside her window, the city continued its nighttime rhythm. Somewhere, other artists were working late shifts, stealing moments for their craft between obligations, wondering if their moment would ever come. Hannah thought of the scholarship program taking shape and the teaching position that would allow her to share her story with students facing similar challenges. The cycle would continue. Her success could create ripples that helped others find their own path from service to symphony. Hannah played one final chord and closed the piano. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities. But unlike 6 months ago, she would face them not as a waitress who secretly composed music, but as a composer who happened to still enjoy serving breakfast on Thursday mornings. The journey had changed her, but not in the ways that mattered most. And that, Hannah realized, was perhaps her greatest achievement of all.